Do you remember 15 years ago, we were told there probably is no God, so stop worrying and enjoy your life? The secular story was so sure of itself, they plastered it on billboards and on buses. They drove it through the great cities of the West in order to tell a story that turns out is a myth. The data is in. The secular story does not help you to stop worrying and enjoy your life more. The secular story is the myth. The Christian story is the reality. This is huge. Last year, The Spectator said its #1 most read article was by Justin Brierley that a revival of Christianity is underway in Britain. Many people dismissed that because, well, Justin Brierley has a book to sell. His book is called The Surprising Rebirth of Belief in God, which spoke of key figures in the meaning crisis coming out on the side of Christianity, but it was very light on statistical data to support it. Last year, Justin was asked about the statistical backing.
And are there any stats, if we're going to have a kind of reason?
This is the thing, and the only stats I quote in the book are the ones that are contrary to my thesis. Yes, there are actually, we know well that the decline in church-going, the decline in religiosity, the rise of the so-called nuns, people who don't claim any religious affiliation. So that's all out there. We can all see the statistics about church-going in the West. And what I present in the book, at least, is essentially just a sense that actually that might not be the full story, that actually there's a sense in which there's a turning of the tide. Now, that doesn't mean that we're seeing a wave coming back at us, but I feel like something has changed, and we might just be at the furthest end of that secularism before it comes back in.
Justin was sensing a change at the level of intellectual discourse about Christianity, and many of us on the ground have been sensing a change. There are more people showing up in church with not much of an idea why they are there. We have felt a vibe shift, but where is the data to back it up? The data is now in. There is a quiet revival that is happening in the UK. That is the name of the Bible Society's report, which was released today. It's called The Quiet Revival. They are comparing extensive survey data from 2018 with data that has just released. In 2018, YouGov surveyed 19,000 adults in England and Wales. And as a follow-up, YouGov have again surveyed 13,000 adults asking the same questions. This is very robust research, though it is about self-reports, and I'll talk about that at the end. I have 5 caveats that I will give at the end of this, but mostly I want to say this is huge, this is astonishing. Here are 10 shifts that we are witnessing in the spiritual landscape of Britain. We are moving from shrinking to growing. Between 2018 and 2024, regular church-going in the UK has gone from 8% to 12%. That is a stunning increase. Now, again, regular church-going means monthly, and regular church-going is about self-report rather than people ticking off names inside the church. But it was self-report back in 2018, and it was monthly back in 2018. And this shift is a huge shift from a shrinking church to an actually growing church. You might have thought that decline was inevitable. Many Christians have thought that church decline is inevitable. Many non-Christians have thought that church decline is inevitable. Look at this graph from Peter Brierley, no relation to Justin. He is perhaps the preeminent statistician of Christianity in the UK, and you can see the figures all going in the wrong direction until today, until the Quiet Revival comes out and tells us that things have grown from 8% to 12%. That is shift number 1, and it is huge. We are shifting from a shrinking to a growing church. Shift number 2, we are moving from old to young. Church-going among 18 to 24-year-olds has risen from 4% to 16%, a 4-fold increase in just 6 years. Take a look at this graph. Back in 2018, the line just went from low to high, from younger to older, and of course it's the retirees that go to church, and of course it's the young people who don't. That is not the scene just 6 years later. 6 years later, it kind of goes on a U-shaped curve, and it's people like me in their mid-40s who are the ones who are not going to church. It is the retirees, and it is the young who are going to church. This is a huge shift from old to young. What it means is that a third of adult churchgoers are aged 18 to 34. That number used to be 14%. It's gone from 14% to 33%. This group of 18 to 24-year-olds are the most likely to pray regularly, with 40% saying that they pray at least monthly. More than half of them have engaged with a spiritual practice over the past 6 months, compared to 42% of those who are older than them. This group, the 18 to 24s, are also the group that's most interested in learning about the Bible, with 37% of them saying that they are curious to discover more about them. Gen Z is proving to be Gen Zeal. Now, some of that zeal is directed towards other things like witch talk and sorcery and Islam and other things, but they are also, when they turn their attention to Christianity, they are engaging with it and they are engaging with spiritual practices. So we've seen a move from shrinking to growing. We've seen a move from old to young. There's also a shift from male to female. Overall, male church-going is outstripping female church-going in this country. 13% of those who say that they go regularly to church are male, 10% of those are female. Now, both have grown. This is not male growth at the expense of women. Female church-going is rising, male church-going is rising, but male church-going is rising faster, such that 21% of men aged 18 to 24 are regular churchgoers. That was under 4% in 2018. From under 4% in 2018 to 21% in 2024. This shift is huge. That is shift number 3 from female to male. Shift number 4 is a shift from white to more diverse. Among under 55s, around 1/3 of churchgoers come from ethnic minorities. When you compare that to over 55s, well, just 6% of churchgoers over 55 are non-white. So among this younger group, under 55, therefore, the church is actually more diverse than the country as a whole. The 2021 census reported that 18% of the UK population are non-white. So when we zoom in on ethnic groups, we see that close to half of black people aged 18 to 34 are now attending church at least monthly. Can I say that again? Half of black people under age 34 are going to church at least monthly, okay? While 1/3 of 18 to 34-year-olds from mixed ethnic backgrounds are likewise regular churchgoers. So there's an ethnic shift from more predominantly white to more diverse, but that's not to say that white church-going is shrinking. White church-going is also growing, it's just not growing as fast as non-white church-growing. So this shift is not simply about immigration. We actually give thanks for immigration and the way that it has bolstered the UK church. We give thanks for the way that young men are going to church. Normally, in the culture wars, you are either pro-immigration or you're pro-young men, but you're not pro-both. I'm here to tell you the Christian church is very thankful for both. The Christian church is very thankful for young men. The Christian church is very thankful for immigrants. So there is a shift from a more predominantly white church to a more diverse church, but that's not to say that white church attendance is down. White church attendance is up. Among 18 to 34-year-old white men, 18% are now attending church monthly, compared to 3% in 2018. So young white men have gone from 3% church attendance to 18% church attendance. That is a dramatic shift. We're also seeing increases among young white women, just not quite as dramatic as that. But as the report says, we are therefore seeing an absolute growth in church-going among young adults, including substantial growth from the white population, but also greater diversity among younger churchgoers than among older groups. So that's shift number 4, from a more predominantly white church to a more diverse church. Shift number 5, there is a move from the Church of England to Catholic and Pentecostal churches. So in 2018, Anglicans made up 41% of churchgoers in this country. That has dropped from 41% down to 34% in 2024. Roman Catholics are now close behind Anglicans in terms of church-going numbers. If you're a churchgoer in the UK, there's a 34% chance that you're Anglican. There's a 31% chance that you are Catholic. That's up from 23% just 6 years ago. So in 2018, churchgoers were 23% Catholic. Now they are 31% Catholic. Pentecostals in that same time have gone up from 4% to 10% of churchgoing in the UK. And so much of this effect has come about through young adults. If you're between 18 and 34 in this country and you go to church, you are just as likely to go to a Pentecostal church as you are to go to a Church of England church. And you're actually twice as likely to go to a Roman Catholic church than you are to go to either an Anglican church or a Pentecostal church. Only 20% of churchgoers between 18 and 34 years old are actually in the Church of England. That's down from 30% in 2018. 41% of churchgoers between 18 and 34 years old are Roman Catholic. 18% are Pentecostal. So there's a shift from the Church of England to other denominations. Here's the sixth shift. It is a shift from nominalism to participation. Do you remember in 2022, the headlines came out about the 2021 census, and for the first time in the UK's history, less than half the country identified as Christian. In the 2021 census, only 46% of the country claimed to be Christian, and that was said to be a real watershed moment in the history of this country. So the census data seems to be that Christianity is trending down. This report, The Quiet Revival, is saying that Christianity is very much trending upwards. How do we account for this? Well, the census is just reporting, do you tick the box Christian on the census? This report is about, do you show up on a Sunday? And those two figures are wildly different. In fact, in the Quiet Revival statistics, those who self-identify as Christian is actually down from the 46% number. In this data from 2024, only 39% of the UK population identifies as Christian. And among the young, among the 18 to 34-year-olds, this drops further to only 29% of 18 to 34-year-olds actually identify as Christian. So what's going on? Well, the report says the key here is to understand the shift that is occurring between nominal and active religious identity, with active identity being one which is intentionally adopted and reflected in distinctive beliefs and actions. The report says across society, and particularly among younger people, the idea that they are to some extent Christian by default is rapidly diminishing, with no religion instead moving into the place for non-practicing people. This shows the importance of recognizing the difference between church-going and non-church-going Christians. So here's a huge shift from nominalism to actual engagement in the church. Fewer and fewer people are reporting as Christian. More and more people are showing up in church, and I think that's for the good. In fact, this report will tell us that if you identify as Christian but don't show up in church, you have higher anxiety, much less hope for the world, and much less self-report about your own well-being in life. To simply name the name of Christianity without engaging in church seems actually to be bad for you. Going to church is incredibly good for you. We'll see that in the data. But what is absolutely worst for you is claiming to be Christian and not showing up in church, not engaging in the practices. So we're seeing a shift here from nominalism to engagement. I've got two thoughts about that. Right now, we are worrying about cultural Christianity and whether people are adopting Christian beliefs purely instrumentally so that we can shore up Western civilization and that kind of thing. I think this report tells us that nominalism can be dangerous. To simply name Christianity and not engage with Christianity leaves you worse off than if you'd never named Christianity at all. And that gels with something I spoke about last year when I said about Brad Wilcox and his research into marriages and domestic violence. His research suggests that the most violent husbands in America are nominal evangelical Protestants who attend church infrequently or not at all. The best kinds of husbands are Christians who say that they are husbands and actually engage in church and religious practices. The worst kind of husbands are husbands that claim to be Christian and are not, and are simply nominal. If you're not going to engage with Christ, it would be better for you not to name the name of Christ. That's what the data is saying, not just the Bible, that's what the data is saying. So there is a danger to nominal Christianity, but interestingly, what this report also shows is that nominalism is actually shrinking. There is becoming less of a danger of nominal Christianity as fewer people are owning the label and more people are pressing into the reality. So that's the sixth shift, from nominalism to engagement. Here's the seventh shift, a move from individualism to community. Among 18 to 34-year-old churchgoers, 63% of them say that they feel close to people in their local area. When you talk to non-churchgoers in that same demographic, only 25% of them feel any kind of connection to their locality. If you are a churchgoer, you are much more likely to feel engaged with your locality than if you are not. That's a significant shift, if you ask me. The eighth shift that this report identifies is a move from passive to active. Have a look at this graph about churchgoers undertaking social activism. 57% of churchgoers give regular financial contributions to charity, as opposed to 27% of non-churchgoers. Or have a look at regularly volunteering for charity or community groups. 41% of churchgoers regularly volunteer, 12% of non-churchgoers do. When it comes to donations to food bank, 40% of churchgoers donate to food bank, half that number donate from the non-church-going population. And when it comes to people saying, I am not engaged in my community at all, well, 7% of churchgoers say, I am not engaged at all. 13% of non-churchgoers say, I am not engaged in social activism at all. Here is a move from passive to active. Ninthly, there's a move from anxiety to peace. 75% of churchgoers agree that their life feels meaningful compared to 49% of non-churchgoers. 69% of churchgoers agree that they feel hopeful about their future compared to 46% of non-churchgoers. And look at the figures for young churchgoers. Those who say, I am happy with my life right now, it's 70% as opposed to non-church-going young adults, only 52%. 80% of young churchgoers say their life feels meaningful, only 52% of young non-churchgoers feel that their life is meaningful. 84% of young churchgoers feel hopeful about the future, only 56% of non-churchgoers do. And when they are asked whether they frequently feel anxious or depressed, 56% of non-churchgoers say yes, 44% of churchgoers do. That's still a tragedy, by the way. This level of anxiety is not right, and here's hoping that some of this quiet revival can have a society-wide impact on this. Anxiety is far too high in both non-church-going and church-going populations, but it is much better in church-going populations. This is the shift from anxiety to peace. The final shift, and this summarizes all the other shifts, this is a shift from a secular myth to religious reality. Do you remember 15 years ago, we were told there probably is no God, so stop worrying and enjoy your life. The secular story was so sure of itself, they plastered it on billboards and on buses. They drove it through the great cities of the West in order to tell a story that turns out is a myth. The reality is that that story, the secular story, leads to much more worry and much less enjoyment. Do you hear that? The data is in. The secular story does not help you to stop worrying and enjoy your life more. The Christian story helps you to stop worrying and enjoy your life more. The data is in. The secular story is the myth. The Christian story is the reality. These are 10 shifts that are happening in this country right now, and they are huge. They are vast. They are seismic. Let me give 5 caveats as I finish. Caveat number 1, this is about the self-report of regular monthly attendance. And you might have all sorts of questions about, can we trust self-reports? And is monthly really what qualifies as regular? And the only thing I'm going to say about that is at least the standards are the same. That was the standard in 2018. That's the standard in 2024. So we are comparing like for like. Second caveat, the Church of England is the outlier here. And maybe this is God's judgment on the Church of England right now, that while the rest of the church is seeing such growth, Anglicans are not really holding their own in the current climate. And perhaps that's judgment on the Church of England. Third caveat, anxiety is still huge here, and this is just an absolute epidemic. And these results, we might pat ourselves on the back and say, yay, church, that only 44% of young churchgoers feel persistently anxious, but that's still an epidemic any way we cut it. Let's not be too triumphalist about this. Fourthly, there is still significant opposition to Christianity and the Bible. At best, a third of the country thinks that God or a higher power exists. That means that the UK still ranks in the bottom 5 of countries in the world as regards, do you believe in God or a higher power? Among young adults, 18 to 34-year-olds, only 33% believe in God or some kind of higher power. 2/3 of young adults don't believe in God. So we are very much a minority, even though we're doing well and we're punching above our weight and all the rest of it, we are still very much a minority. Many in this country think that the Bible is a force for good, and the survey brings that out. But many don't. When you look at how people respond to whether the Bible is relevant or not, look at these last 3 statistics. When asked, society could be changed for the better by the message of the Bible, 32% agree, but 31% disagree. When asked, does the Bible have the potential to help me answer some deep questions, 28% say yes, 43% say no. And then on the question, is the Bible relevant to me personally? Well, we can rejoice that 1/4 of the UK population say that the Bible might be relevant to them personally. That is tens of millions of people, and we can rejoice in that. But look, 51% don't think it's relevant at all. There is cause for much rejoicing here, but let's not kid ourselves that the vast majority of the UK is warm towards Christianity, because that's simply not true. One thing that's very encouraging to me is that 34% of young adults say that they will come to church if a friend invites them. To me, that is the most likely evangelistic strategy to breed success. If 1/3 of your friends will come to church when you invite them, let's just do that, okay? But let's also recognize that 2/3 will say no, okay? 18 to 24-year-olds are the age group most likely to agree that Christianity plays a positive role in modern Britain. 47% of 18 to 24-year-old non-churchgoers agree that it's a positive thing for Christians to talk about their faith with non-Christians. So half the population think it's a good thing when you try to share your faith with them, but half don't. Okay, this is not the story of Britain at large being very warm to Christians, very warm to evangelism, and they're all going to show up in church on Sunday. This is not that story, okay? This is the story of a small minority, which doesn't change the fact that most people don't believe in God, and most people do not think Christianity plays a positive role in society. This is not the time for Christians to say, "We are so back," and slap ourselves on the back and be triumphalistic. This is the time, though, to be very bold. This is the time to press forward, to see that the fields really are white for harvest, and it's a quiet revival. But I wonder whether every revival is actually a quiet revival when you're living through it. You don't know you're going through the first Great Awakening when the first Great Awakening is happening. You don't know that there's going to be a second or a third. The slow, patient ferment of the early church between the time of Christ and the time of Constantine was a growth level of around about 4.3% per annum per church. So revival, when it happens, can absolutely work like yeast through a batch of dough, but it works slowly. And this is why we're noticing, there's just an extra handful of young guys showing up in my church on a Sunday. That doesn't feel like revival. It just feels like something that's, isn't that interesting? But actually, when you statistically look at that, that is the difference between less than 4% of young men showing up in church and over 20% of young men showing up in church. It won't perhaps feel like fire falling from heaven. It will feel like an opportunity, and it will feel like a mess. Now, if you want to press into more of how we can take advantage of this opportunity, Justin Brierley and I are putting on a conference on the 22nd of November. It's called Responding to the Rebirth. The spiritual tide is turning. The church needs to be ready, and we want to help you to be the Christian and to be the church that can respond rightly to the quiet revival that is happening all around us. It's happening on the 22nd of November. I can't wait to share with you the platform of speakers. I'll be there, Justin Brierley will be there, and many others will join us. It'll be a wonderful time, so please do save the date, 22nd of November in central London. We'd love to see you there to learn more about the quiet revival. Thank you so much to the Bible Society for providing these statistics, but we'll see you again on the next video.